Hello, everybody. Welcome to Idiot
Hello,
Soup.
I'm George.
And I'm
Welcome to Idiot Soup.
And I'm
This is
Danielle.
our fifth try recording the intro.
But we got it.
We're going to talk
It's
about
perfect.
Ukrainegate.
Ukraine. Oh, yeah. I just want to say to the people who are writing articles and decided that Ukraine, the scandal with Ukraine, should be dubbed Ukrainegate, I think you're stupid. And I think you should stop.
That's a really hot take, Danielle.
No, do you remember when Kennedy gave the response to the State of the Union address, and he had like
Does anyone
some
want?
he had some oil on his lip,
other
and then it was
Kennedy.
like, and they said it
Where
like,
he's like dripping.
yeah, and they called it Lip Gloss Gate. Like, I think we need a new name for scandals, because Watergate was just the name of the building, but everything now is Gate. So now we have Ukrainegate, which is just great. It's just a mess. It's just a hot mess. So, we're going to do a brief exposition to Ukrainegate. So, if you want to explain that, George.
So we start in sometime in the 2010s.
2013.
2013, when Hunter Biden.
We're starting there. I thought we were starting at Ukraine's, like, political revolution.
Oh, okay. We'll start there. They, so the pro-Russian president, rigged an election and then tried to suspend a lot of, he blocked a trade deal with the EU, and that led to a quasi uprising sort of thing, and he was ousted and replaced with a pro-EU president. And, then we'll move into Hunter Biden.
Well, basically,
fail son.
Well, the
of
exposition
Vice
is important
President,
because it's important because with any revolution, the end result is always like some degree of corruption. So you end with a very corrupt government that is currently sitting in office.
What about the Bolshevist revolution?
Okay, and then you have
There's no
Joe
corruption
Biden.
there. Enter
who
Joe Biden.
enters the seat before Hunter Biden.
And his fail son, Hunter Biden, who is just awful at like everything related to life.
Okay.
Anyway, Hunter Biden is getting paid $50,000 a month to be on the board of this Ukrainian gas company, even though he has no experience at all whatsoever in Ukrainian gas.
Well, I think we need to backtrack because before Hunter was appointed as a member of this board, Biden was tasked with rooting out the corruption going on in Ukraine.
Which is very funny considering Joe Biden is utterly corrupt. Anyway.
Okay.
Anyway, back to the fail son, Hunter Biden. He was only appointed because Joe Biden was the vice president.
I mean, he didn't have any skills. There's nothing that he brought to the table to be making
He has no skills in life.
$50,000
He
a
has
month.
no skills in life whatsoever.
All right. I just think you just don't like the Bidens, so we're going to try to keep your...
Hunter Biden.
We're going to try to keep your personal biases...
Hunter Biden. We need to do an episode on Hunter Biden.
We don't need to...
It's
okay.
so funny.
All right.
It's so funny.
Okay, so basically what happened is there's this whole scandal because Donald Trump made a call to the new president of Ukraine. And
it should be noted, the new president of Ukraine is formerly an actor. as one of his roles, played the president of Ukraine.
Okay, thanks for that beautiful tidbit. Okay,
so he definitely has the experience to be president.
Okay, so here's what happened. Basically, Donald Trump's on the phone with this guy, and they're chit-chatting, Ukraine, they're talking money. After they finish, like, talking money, Donald Trump's like, hey, I need a favor. Can you look into what's going on with Joe Biden? Because when Joe Biden was weeding out corruption in Ukraine, he called for the dismissal of this prosecutor, Viktor Shokin. I'm not really sure how it's pronounced, but that guy was like pretty much one nasty dude, and he got ousted, and he was the one that, at the time, he was prosecutor for Ukraine, so he was handling the case involving Burisma, Joe Biden's son. So that's all fine and dandy, right? And then there's a whistleblower who writes this complaint, brings it to the national intelligence, and the inspector general basically disagreed with the director of national intelligence, the sitting director of national intelligence, and they disagreed over whether or not Congress had the right to hear this report. So representative from California, Representative Schiff, basically went on Twitter and kind of unleashed this mass of how they felt this was totally against the way that procedure should go. Congress definitely has a right to hear what's in this report, whistleblower report, because the Inspector General says that they do. So that's kind of the issue that we're kind of dealing with, is that not only was maybe there's something interesting going on Donald Trump's part, but also that there was kind of like they're trying to stop Congress from hearing it. And what's interesting is that after all this hullabaloo, everyone trying to get Congress out of it, suddenly everyone's deciding to make everything public. The whistleblower complaint is now public. The transcripts from the call are now public. Everything's public, and they didn't even want it to get to Congress in the first place. So it's kind of interesting to see what's going on there. So if you have any takes on Ukraine.
Well, of course, the Democrats in Washington are trying to impeach him over this, which I find absolutely hilarious, considering everything that he's done before, and this is what they're going to impeach him for. Okay, here's the thing. When the U.S. was overthrowing democratically elected governments, like, as a hobby, all the liberals, like, not only did they not speak up, but they actively encouraged it. But when it happens to them, they completely lose their shit.
Yes. Well, I think one of the issues with, that's the thing, is you said, like, oh, this is the thing that they're choosing to impeach him with. And the fact of the matter is they've tried like 17,000 times to impeach Trump. I mean, at this point, the Democrats are pretty much like the boy that cried wolf, and they're just like crying impeachment. Every little thing that the president does that seems remotely like it could be an infringement upon any sort of law or statute, the Democrats are calling for impeachment. But what's interesting about this time is that everyone was like galvanized to do this. Like Pelosi, she's supposed to be the one who is more reserved about it, and I think at this point, if she didn't call for impeachment, I think it would reflect negatively upon her. I think that she would actually suffer some backlash for not calling for impeachment when everyone else in the Democratic Party is saying, hey, this guy needs to be impeached because of what happened. He's abusing his power as the chief of state or head of state. He's abusing his power, his foreign policy power and everything to, you know, help the candidate. But then it's a question is, did Donald Trump actually do anything worthy of impeachment?
I think it's really funny that they're all calling him corrupt, but they're also corrupt. All right,
but this is not about
it's like
them.
It's like the, you know, the Spider-Man thing where the Spider-Man's pointing at the other Spider-Man.
Yeah, I do. But
yeah, because it is a well-known fact that the liberal establishment all around the world is utterly corrupt.
Okay, but do you think that Donald Trump did anything wrong with this
I think
request?
By nature of being a capitalist.
Okay, let me rephrase. Do you think Donald Trump broke any campaign finance law or abuse of foreign power?
Oh, he clearly abused of power.
In asking for
dirt on your political rival is clearly an abuse of power.
The only thing is the issue arises like with the letter of the law. So impeachment and conviction are like two completely different things, you know? So with the campaign finance law, it requires that Donald Trump knowingly broke the law. It's one of the only...
Well, this isn't about campaign finance.
Well, yeah. Well, a lot of people are calling upon campaign finance laws to say you can't receive aid from a foreign power in a campaign. And they're arguing that dirt on another political candidate is something of value. They're arguing that Donald Trump, in receiving this so-called dirt...
He clearly knew that was illegal then.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you not?
I mean, another thing that I thought was, like, really interesting was if you read the transcripts, when he's talking to the president of Ukraine, he says, I'll get Rudy Giuliani on it. And I know that Giuliani's been involved in Ukraine. He is deeply entrenched. But I thought it was just really weird that he was saying, let's get my personal attorney in on this. You know? I don't know. That was just weird to me that he was picking up the guy that he is essentially his right-hand man in this situation.
It's almost as if the ruling class is utterly corrupt.
Okay, we're not going to talk about the ruling class.
I mean, you don't see the trend here? Joe Biden is corrupt and Donald Trump is corrupt, and then everyone calling them corrupt is also corrupt.
What about the American people?
Well, I'm talking about the politics.
Okay, well, that being said, there's been a lot of talk about, like you mentioned before, this all backfiring on Joe Biden more than it backfires on Trump. Do you think that's a possibility that could happen here?
I mean, I guess. Who even knows anymore? Like, Hell World is so unpredictable.
Well, the thing is,
he survived so much stuff, and I would be amazed if this is the thing that takes him down.
It's just another one of the gaffe machines. But then again, you can give the same argument for Trump, is that there's so much that's been going on with this presidency, so many questionable things. This is what they finally decided to impeach them on. Why wouldn't the same maybe be true for Joe Biden? Because this is going to prompt a heavier investigation into the actual what happened with Burisma, what happened with the gas company, whether or not they were corrupt. But the thing is, before Hunter Biden was even with Burisma, even with the gas company, the UK already did their investigation on Burisma. They already found that the company wasn't corrupt. I mean, it probably was. It's a Ukrainian gas company, but they found that it wasn't. And the interesting thing is, Joe Biden was probably better off before all this came out. Because before Joe Biden even dismissed Victor, the prosecutor in Ukraine, the investigation into his son had ended. Essentially, the prosecutor that was dismissed was known notoriously by the international community for being a very, for lack of a better word, shitty prosecutor. He didn't investigate any corruption that was actually going on in Ukraine. He was just renowned for being a bad prosecutor. And before Joe Biden got him ousted, there was no investigation. So now that the prosecutor's out and all this is being reopened, I think it really could backfire on Joe Biden more than it did before, because it's being brought to the forefront of the conversation. It's being brought to the forefront of the politics. And Joe Biden, I think, could suffer serious damages to his campaign from his son's involvement in this.
Possibly. But also, possibly not.
Wow. Way to be vague. But I also think it's very funny because everyone in Donald Trump's family has, like, a government job.
Right.
So it's one thing for Joe Biden's son to get $50,000 a month from a private gas company. It's another thing for Donald Trump's families to be on the payroll of the United States government. And for us to not see any problem with that, but to see a problem with Joe Biden's son, I just think it's very interesting. Because, I mean, like, where do you draw the line at what's corruption and what's just politics? Like, nepotism has always been a part of politics. It's probably never going to go away until someone makes it. And I don't think either of them...
Until we establish the dictatorship of the proletariat.
Okay. Well, aside from establishing the dictator of the proletariat, I just...
Dictatorship of the proletariat.
Sorry, the dictatorship of the proletariat. I just don't see that there's any way for either of these sides to make...
So you agree that socialism is the way forward?
No, I do not agree that socialism is the
way
way forward.
You agree that the dictatorship of the proletariat is an
I'm merely just
institution?
Taking what you're saying and moving on, because I feel like it was just a very snide comment that wasn't meant to be taken seriously. So we're not gonna address that.
I think nepotism is the inevitable byproduct of the political economy of capitalism.
Okay. And we'll be right back.
Let me expand upon that. Let me expand upon that. There is a jobs guarantee program for children of rich people all across the world. Just be powerful, and your kid will get a job. And that is the result of the lobbying effects that capital has over the governmental process.
Okay, and now back to the impeachment of President Donald J. Trump. We will be back. All right, so this week, Speaker Nancy Pelosi announced that they were going to be launching an impeachment inquiry into the dealings of Ukrainegate. And like 5 seconds later, McCarthy got up and said, this isn't an impeachment because the House hasn't voted on it. So then we're kind of getting into this like very nuanced idea of like what's impeachment and what's not. But really, I just think all of it is semantics because, you know, the House has basically said they're going to move forward with the impeachment. The majority of the Democrats, I think it's like, what's the number?
221.
221.
And one independent.
Are in support of moving forward with the impeachment process. So that seems like a hearing at the very least is something that might become inevitable if enough evidence surfaces. So then enter the big question: will impeachment happen, or will it not?
Me? Yeah, I guess. Why not? I mean, they have a majority.
But then there's some complications with the actual issue itself.
Like what?
Okay,
like
so
what?
for example.
Elaborate, Daniel.
So like I said before, these people really didn't want any of this information to get out. The Director of National Intelligence put a halt in the whistleblower testimony coming out. And then suddenly today, everyone said all the testimony is coming out. So we got to see firsthand what was going on. Turns out the whistleblower wasn't even in the room. So this is all like hearsay upon hearsay upon hearsay. And if it gets,
he have access to the transcript though?
But the transcript, the bottom of the transcript says this is based off of notes. It like says that it's not a verbatim conversation. So then introduces the question of like, is Donald Trump's, is the transcript that President Trump released legit? But I think that
asking that though.
Yeah. So the thing is like, it's going to be hard to impeach on this. I think just because of the very fact that Trump has been so open about it. He came out and he said, yeah, I did this. A lot of people are saying like, oh, it's like, this big scandal, this big cover up. But I mean, like when you have the president is literally coming out and saying, I did this. I asked for a favor because I think Joe Biden's corrupt. I think Ukraine's corrupt. I think Burisma's corrupt. I mean, can you say how hard is it going to be for them to prove that he did something bad? If you know how they say like, in the TV shows, when someone runs away from the cop, it makes them assume that they're guilty. It's like Donald Trump isn't running away here. He's standing in front of the camera and he's saying, I did this. Rudy and me tag teamed him because we did it for like national security, or we did it to make sure Ukraine wasn't corrupt. So how are they going to be able to bring forth those charges with that complication in there?
I don't think that's a complication. I think it strengthens their argument.
The argument of the Democrats?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think Donald Trump did, in this situation, I think he did the best thing that he could have done. He stood up there and he said he released the transcripts. I remember before they came out, I was like, if they're redacted, I'm gonna lose my mind. I really, really, really wanted them to be redacted really badly because that would have been so funny. But they weren't. They were just plain transcripts, and even though they're not verbatim, it's gonna be hard for them to play this as damning evidence because once again, it's not a judicial process. It's up to whatever goes on in the Senate, whatever happens in the Senate, and that's a very flexible thing. Because they're not going to be able to prove that he violated campaign finance law. I mean, intent is a really, really hard thing to prove. It's why it's not included in the majority of our laws, except for like, first degree murder, you got to have intent and knowledge that you're breaking the law. Everyone knows that murder is legal. But to prove that Donald Trump knowingly broke this law and did this on purpose, I think it's going to be hard for them to do that.
Well, you're talking about a completely separate thing. Like,
what do you mean?
Campaign finance versus an abuse of office.
So you think it'd just be abuse of office, just like the traditional
favors?
So the other option is they can just charge him with high crimes and misdemeanors, which is what they used against.
Well, that's like a broad.
That's what they
like
use.
No, you have to narrow that down to a specific.
I mean, one of the things that they charged Nixon with was, quote, conduct unbecoming of a president. I mean, it can be vague because I think the issue is like the entire Senate knows what's going on. The entire House of Reps knows what's going on. So they don't really have to narrow it down. So then enters the question is, should they go at Donald Trump with every weapon they have at their disposal? Should they say, hey, here's what happened with Stormy Daniels, and here's what happened with this and this, and so on and so forth? Or should they say, here's what happened with Ukraine, this is enough, we don't need to bring in all that stuff that happened before the presidency and all the sort of questionable stuff that happened during his presidency. Let's try to keep it as the least bit of politically charged as we can, so it doesn't look like we're just looking for an excuse to get him out of office.
The better option is to throw everything at him and just lay it all out on the table. Everything that he's done.
See, I disagree. Because if none of those worked up until now, it's like you risk the danger of this hearing becoming unnecessarily convoluted, and you risk people labeling it a political move rather than saying, hey, the president did something that is a
No, it's
egregious
always
violation.
a political move.
Well, yeah, I
It's
mean,
all- it's
obviously,
always-
you can't
it's an
separate
inherently
impeachment from its
political thing.
political.
No, and that's the thing. The impeachment is really decided in public opinion and not in the actual facts of the thing.
Well, yeah, I think that's part of why Nancy
that's
Pelosi
why-
was pushed towards making this call for impeachment, because the party had so overwhelmingly moved towards impeachment. It was just this tidal wave of movement as soon as everything with Ukraine came out. It was kind of like a this is our shot type of thing. But then again, the people weren't moved by everything else that they've tried to impeach Donald Trump with.
I think right. So public opinion is very, very fickle, right?
Yeah.
And people are idiots. And they immediately, for the vast majority of cases at least, if you are charged with something, people will think you're guilty.
Yeah.
And I think if they throw everything out there, at least with the majority of people, something will stick.
So you think it's just a matter of trying to get the most people to say, like, hey, this is wrong.
Yeah.
But then you enter the question, like, the whole Stormy Daniels thing, like, why do stuff that's happened before his presidency that shouldn't even matter if you're charging him with a violation?
I think you can poke holes in any individual thing, but when there's so many, charges, so many counts, something is gonna inevitably sway public opinion when presented with all this stuff that he's done. One case, right? Maybe not. 2 cases, maybe not, but 10 or 15 things.
Well, I'm just worried that even though the Democratic Party is the main proponent of this, I'm just worried about this movement, this time around, this go round at impeachment. I'm worried about it looking like they're just swinging until they hit something. If one party looks like they're swinging until they hit something, all those times that Donald Trump tweets out presidential harassment ! I think that's just going to look more justified if it looks like the Democrats are just going to go and go and go and go until they get something. It's going to look like they're, not to say like fabricating stuff, but just looking for a reason, looking for any excuse to impeach him.
I think that's what happened with Clinton in the 90s. And if you remember, who won the next election?
But then it's like
the Republicans.
But then it's like
that's literally what the Republicans did, and his approval rating went up during impeachment, not down.
But Clinton was also impeached for something completely different. I mean, lying to a grand jury, like, it's not like he lied about calling a foreign country for asking for dirt on his political opponent. He lied about having sex with someone. That's a very
right.
This very. No, I think it's more of a moral standard than it is
right. And I think that's the Republican Party trying to get him for something.
Exactly. And they couldn't even impeach him. I mean, like,
I know,
like
but
you said,
in the end, it ended up helping them.
The thing is, they had this like undeniable proof that Clinton broke a law. Perjuring yourself is breaking a law. He was disbarred. His license to practice law was removed. There's this undeniable proof that he's practically already been convicted, and they still couldn't impeach him. So why can they impeach Trump with something that's hearsay?
He literally admitted to it, though.
I know, but then how do you prove that it's not like the efforts to root out corruption in Ukraine instantly stopped. It's not like we're not still trying to root out corruption in Ukraine. I mean, he can take that argument. He can just say, like, this wasn't something out of the blue. This wasn't something unusual.
Wait, he literally admitted to the crime, and you're saying it's going to be hard?
No, I'm saying the question is, I'm saying it's going to be hard to prove whether or not it's a crime.
It is.
In what sense?
I mean, by the law, it is a crime to ask a foreign adversary for dirt on political rivals.
But then, see, his thing is like, he's saying that it's not asking for dirt. You have to prove that it was intended to be used for this campaign. If Donald Trump gets his personal lawyers up there and like, oh, here's this memo from like 3 weeks ago saying like, we're going to root out corruption in Ukraine and we're going to talk about Burisma, I think that's just something that's very malleable. I don't think there is, and there's also not a lot of, like Donald Trump said that he asked, but when it comes down to the law, how you asked, what you asked, the way you asked it, it all plays into whether or not it really is a crime. And people are going at this with campaign finance law, and they're going at it with the misdemeanors and high crimes. They're going at it from several different approaches, and I think that there needs to be a unified front of them deciding if they're going to impeach Trump, what they're going to use, how they're going to do it. I don't think campaign finance law is the best way to do it because that's too convoluted. But
I think the thing is, though, people clearly see his intent with it. Like,
yeah,
you can talk about the letter of the law, but people clearly see his intent with it. And that's what impeachment is a political thing. It's and conviction comes down to, I mean, not that I think he'll get convicted in the Senate, but,
yeah,
it really is a court of public opinion, and people see his intent. And
so then why, like you said, why bring up all these other old things if it's just going to take focus away from the fact that, hey, he asked a foreign country for dirt on a political adversary? Like, why even bring that up? Why even try to...
I think it just strengthens their case to show that he is...
I think it's just going to divert
corrupt.
attention away from this one paramount issue. But then there's a question of, like...
differences of opinion.
Okay. And then there's a question of, once again, like we saw the last impeachment with Clinton, like, not to say that it wasn't bad. Every case of impeachment is bad, but the American spirit didn't really suffer much. Can America survive a Trump impeachment? Like, after Nixon, the country was devastated, but that was also, one of the first modern instances of a true breach of trust by an executive. But can the American people survive losing this president? Not to say, like, politically can they survive, will be good for the country, the economy, whatever, but, like, can the spirit of the American people remain intact if we go through an impeachment like this?
Yes, because people are idiots and will very quickly forget this.
I don't know if we'll forget it, but also I guess what happened with Nixon was different because that was a crime, like, unto the American people, breaking into Watergate, lying to everyone, lying to the reporters, lying, not releasing the tapes and everything. I don't think it's the same scenario, but I do see instances in which this could definitely affect the current political climate in negative ways. The last person to move the guy who moved for impeachment against Nixon was, like, ousted. Like, I don't think this might wreck Pelosi politically. It's going to wreck a lot of Democrats politically, a lot of Republicans politically. If it goes through, it's going to wreck a lot of people, is basically what's happening. And it might have an adverse effect on some of the candidates themselves. I mean, if Trump gets impeached for that, it could bring a lot more attention to Joe Biden, and it could end up dragging him through the mud and dragging him down. And then you're left with Warren and Sanders.
Warren and Sanders have already called for impeachment and supported it, so I'm not exactly sure it will drag them down in any way. But
not them, just Biden. I think he's going to suffer.
Hopefully, I hope.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't like Joe.
If you want to know why, check out the first episode. Go back and listen to that. So yeah, I think that's that on impeachment. I think we just have to wait to see what happens. It's a very volatile thing. It could really go one way or the other at this point. So yeah. So thank you for listening to this episode of Idiot Soup. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Idiot Soup. You can find us on Instagram at Idiot Soup Podcast, on Twitter at Idiot Soup Pod, and also on Facebook if you want to get in touch with us.
If you're a boomer.
If you're a boomer, then you can get in touch with us on Facebook. So, with that being said, that concludes this episode of Idiot Soup. Goodbye. Goodbye.